I'll make someone up.
Yeah.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? We're going to debate one of the most important topics of all time. And after this debate, no matter what your position is, you will have the opposite position. We're here to debate anarchy versus limited government. Here to debate the anarchist position is Victor Prost. Victor Prost is an artist, caricaturist, and he's going to have a movie coming out soon called Pop Goes the Culture, which you should all see and buy. And he is going to debate anarchy. We also have special guest Wayne, who is going Wayne Simmons, who is an objectivist, a constitutionalist, a limited government guy, and he is going to debate limited government. And you are going to, well, you may not see him, but you will hear from him.
Yeah, I'll try my best for you to all see me very shortly.
Great. So now, Wayne, you have 12 minutes on the clock. Go.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for this debate. I definitely agree that it's a very, very important debate, especially in the broader classical liberal tradition. We're all sort of, I think there's ideological splits within the classical liberal tradition, and there have been splits in the 20th century with some primary people. So I think that this is a very important discussion for others who are sort of neophytes to classical liberalism to sort of understand the various this main variant, this main split in the in this community, if you will. And I do think that there are some profound differences, and I do think that those profound differences have drastic differences at the political level. So I'm actually defending the position of objective law, so objective government. A constitution is a legal document that is, there are various forms of constitutions out there, but I'm advocating an actual objective approach, an objectivist approach to how to get to a constitution once you have this particular groundwork for it. So I think that the best way to actually start this argument is to look at what objective law is in terms of its what is the foundation for objective law, and what that is man's nature. Man is a certain kind of entity, and the objective law would be true necessarily as a result of that. So if we ground objective law in man's nature, which is true because of the law of identity, in the sense of we can actually define what the essence or the essential nature of man is, despite the fact that there are a lot of irrational ideas out there, and that people embracing those irrational ideas. So I start with that position. I lay my cards on the table to say that I believe man is a being of rational, volitional consciousness. That it's in the sense that to contrast it with a determinist biological view is that I believe that human beings that there is no necessary antecedent causal factors that would compel me to do something that I've chosen not to do. So if I choose to raise my arm, and I wish you could see me, I've raised my arm right now, I've made a conscious choice to do so. It's not like my arm just sort of raises up and I say, well, that's the thing with the arm that goes up and goes down. Sort of John Searle's approach to explaining how volitional consciousness works, in the sense that that this is our distinct mode of understanding the world, that we have a certain nature, and we use reason in order to understand the world. We need reason. I mean, it's a part of our survival mechanism. So if we, in order for us to understand the world that is objectively real, that it exists independent of our consciousness, that we can then form concepts from precepts, and then higher level concepts from that, and so it's an integrated approach in understanding the world. reason, as a stating, is a survival mechanism. That's an individual making choices, individuals choosing to live and making that choice. And so, given the choice they choose to live, they have to exercise their reason in order to do so. And Rand uses the example of a deserted island where you have to use reason in order to survive. Now, obviously, living with other people, we have to respect the fact that they use reason. Freedom is a social requirement of man's nature. So there's what is right in terms of being on our own and sort of using our brain and trying to understand things. We have to respect others to do the same thing. Now, government, I guess I'll sort of continue on that vein of thought, that we acquire property in order for us to live, and we trade with others, and so we need not only property rights, but we need freedom of contract in order to do so. So we have property rights, freedom of contract. And this is all based on this idea of I deal with others based on the idea that they have volition, they have a life to live, I have a life to live, and we're not a means to the ends of others, we're an end in ourselves. We deal with others in terms of persuasion, but we don't use coercion. So the government itself, to define the purpose of government in this sort of view, is that the government is a direct result of our nature, and at a level where we have to respect each other's rights. The position I hold is that you have an absolute right to your life, liberty, and property, and that can't be violated but through your own consent. So it's a consent-based approach, and so the law reflects that. So the law is objective in the sense that it understands that there needs to be proper procedures. If a violation happens, the government's job is to retaliate against those who have initiated the use of force, and a retaliatory use of force has to be under objective control, because there has to be objective procedures that have to be followed and rigorously followed, there is a variety of different perspectives out there. So I've given you the human-centric perspective. There's also, in the culture, we have to, Victor has to concede this, and so you, Daniel, is that there is a God-centric view. There's a theocratic view. This is a battle ideologically that we all know exists. It exists in the United States, or the Republican Party exists in Canada. There's a variety of different perspectives, and this is the God-centered perspective. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and a whole host of other mystical views out there. Then you have the ethnocentric perspective. There's people out there that have their own ethnic perspectives. They believe that the source of that humans should be sacrificed to their particular ethnic view, and they would like to impose their particular perspective on others. This is where you get affirmative action programs and that sort of thing. Then you have the biocentric perspective, which is the environmentalist perspective, and of course, in this perspective, they believe in that man has to basically be surrendered to Gaia, that there's the rights that the planet take precedent over man. Then there's the gynocentric perspective. You have the feminist perspective, and they would argue that the patriarchy exists as a form of violence, and that if we want to get rid of violence, we have to get rid of the idea of men having control over the government and stuff like that. We have to have laws, respecting women, and in the sense of a collectivism. So these are all forms of collectivism. They exist, they're not going away. So now we have Victor's polycentric and your polycentric perspective, and a polycentric legal system. So we look at having all of these various perspectives, and if you allow for the idea of pluralistic law, what you've done essentially is focus the idea of thought law, which is the idea that in order for the long arm of the government, we use the word arm. It's a very interesting word, to use the analogy of the arm, because the arm of the government is the police, and the police is the mind, is the law, and the law determines what the long arm of the government will do. And so if you have a situation where you have various perspectives, you're going to have various collectivisms arguing for their particular view of what is right, what is just. And so I will, I don't know how am I close, Daniel, to the time?
3 minutes, a little less.
Okay, 3 minutes, a little less. Okay, so you have, I think that those who are listening to me should definitely, after this debate, go to Robert Benenato's The Contradiction in Anarchism, because he really lays, I think, the best argument that I've ever seen against the anarchist perspective. And so basically what the anarchists are basically advocating, and they don't realize it, is they sincerely believe that they are merely advocating competition in protection of rights. In fact, what their position would necessitate is competition in defining what rights are. And so you would have all of these various organizations, these various isms out there kind of battling out for what they believe is right. And then you add the profit motive in that. And as Mises has pointed out, you know, the market is the ultimate democratic, view. Customers vote with their dollar. Well, you know what? You're going to have an issue with various defense agency, or whatever you want to call your DROs, which are just mini states as far as I'm concerned. So you're not really anti-state. I'm an advocate of the idea of the sovereignty of the individual. You have the advocate the whim of the particular subjective groups that are ever going to be vying for power. But then you have a situation where your paying customers are going to, if they're going to be, you're going to have your justice agency, which is going to arrest, prosecute, and imprison. That's a state. I mean, that's a state. And if I'm paying that particular justice agency and they're putting me in jail, well, hell, you know what? You're not going to get very much market share by having your customers in jail. So you have a direct conflict of interest. You have a conflict of interest of the paying customer who's paying to actually have that service provided, but then you're throwing them in jail because of some document. But they're just going to say, hell with that, I'm going to go to another agency that's actually going to make sure that I don't end up in jail. So, so you have a direct conflict of interest. No, you need to have a law that tomorrow I know that my rights are going to be protected, and it's not going to be subject to the whim of the marketplace. And so this is a very important debate, because the anarchists, I would argue, are not only is anarchism impractical, it's immoral, because I have a right to exist for my own sake and not for the sake of others, and I have a right to have my rights subject to the whims of the marketplace and the postmodern subjectivist view that there can be no truth, and this would lend itself to that particular perspective. So yes, I defend objective law and an objective government, and objective procedures determine what is just. And that's what governments do, is justice, and this would be an incredible injustice if we allowed for anarchy to exist. Thank you very much.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Victor, you ready?
I am, as a matter of fact.
All right, begin.
All right. Well, one thing I want to say from the outset is how much Wayne and I agree on so many things, which I can't cover in my terse time here. But there are major agreements, areas that we agree on. So we're not completely opposites, I don't feel. Now, the government is a very broad abstraction, and as such, we all tend to have the habit of thinking of the state as if it were some powerful entity that looks over a mass of mere mortal individuals, ensuring and keeping the glue together of society and protecting individual rights, because it's outside of the market, you see. So, we tend to think of the state as, separate from the market, separate from people. We tend to think of Thomas Hobbes' Mighty Leviathan or whatever, right? But scientifically, empirically, the state is just made up, and this might be a shock to objectivists, but are you ready? I hope you're sitting down, Wayne. But the government is just made up of people. The government is just made up of people. Okay, now in the book City of God, St. Augustine relates the story of a notorious pirate, and the pirate plundered and small boats and villages along the coastline. He was eventually apprehended and brought to the mighty emperor Alexander the Great, and the emperor angrily demanded of him, "How dare you molest the seas?" To which the cheeky pirate replied with unabashed insolence, "How dare you molest the whole world? Because I do it with a small boat, I'm called a pirate and a thief, and you, with a great navy, molest the world, and you're called an emperor." But we have to ask, what is the real difference between a pirate and of action? Both the pirate and the emperor use force and violence to accomplish their goals. Both men expropriated the property of other people. So what's the real difference between a pirate and an emperor? And we can ask that very same question in modern times, in contrasting the political elite to private criminals. What is the difference? Now, this is probably where Wayne and I agree, where I agree with the objectivists, in which I have a little some troubles with most anarchists, not all, but most. I would argue that the state is a moral institution. Now, might sound very bizarre to anarchists. What did he say? What did Victor say? The state is a moral institution? Well, bear with me. Now, although an essential characteristic of government is the institutionalization of naked force, of initiatory force, I know the objectivists would argue that no, it's a monopolization of retaliatory force, but in its nature, in its functioning, it has to first initiate force to make any claims to be the protector of individual rights, or to coincide itself as an institution of retaliatory force. Now, government is the institutional embodiment of a moral argument, as Peikoff would say, as any of the objectivists would say, and its legitimacy is contingent on the validity of that argument. So the government is an institutionalized embodiment of a moral argument. Politics rests on ethics.
Mm-hmm.
A certain theory of ethics. Political power, unlike sheer physical force, is an alleged right for making laws for the public good. Now, I said alleged. This moral right is what distinguishes a government from, let's say, a criminal gang. That's what's asserted. Now, in saying that, we have to understand, I'm just using a very broad, abstract, I'm not speaking of any specific ethics right now, I'm just talking about ethics, discipline, the area, that branch in philosophy, a morality, any morality, is a set of rules to guide the actions of individual human beings. This speaks of the egoist ethics, this speaks of the altruist ethics, this speaks of the collectivist ethics, this speaks of utilitarian ethics. I'm just talking about ethics. Politics rests on ethics, period. A government that permits or prohibits certain actions is proceeding from a moral code. A government, whatever kind of government, that permits or prohibits certain actions is proceeding from a moral code. Politics is not some free-floating phenomena that is disassociated from the other branches in philosophy. I'm placing a lot of stress on this for a very specific reason, because if we are to understand the nature of this institution, we have to distinguish a government from any other activity of people asserting and initiating violence against other human beings. We have to make those distinguishing characteristics to separate one from the other. Okay, now there's two main normative features of the state. Number one, the claim to use legitimate coercion. A criminal thug does not make any claims to legitimacy. He just wants you to hand over your fucking wallet. He's not making moral arguments. Okay, but the state does. Number two, the state claims to be the final arbiter in matters involving coercion. So they not only claim a moral legitimacy over force, they also claim a monopoly over that legitimate use. Political philosophy, by its very nature, in other words, normative discipline. Now, now we have to understand, now that we have more of an understanding of the nature of government, qua government, is anarchism. Anarchism and anarchy are undoubtedly the most misrepresented ideas in political philosophy. So let's set the record straight. Anarchy is, by a very elementary definition, a descriptive definition, is the absence of government. That's very simple and straightforward. But why the absence of government? Why absence of government? But if there's going to be arguments for such a state society, it proceeds from a moral question. There's a normative standard here. If we dig a little bit deeper, we can expand the definition of anarchism as opposition to an institution that claims the moral authority to initiate the use of physical force against means without rulers, not without rules. And what is the moral guts of anarchy? Moral opposition. And the type of rulers that anarchists oppose are violent rulers. And they do so guided by a moral principle. And the crucial fundamental ethic in this question is the non-aggression principle. There's going to be a lot to be said about that, you know, but it's completely compatible with individual rights, of course. And it's the backbone of civilized society. It's not some kind of anarchist dictum. Non-aggression is not an optional anarchist doctrine. It's the backbone of any society that we can call civilized. And so, from this stance, you know, anarchism is not controversial if we understand it within that framework. So, voluntarism and the ethics of consent is the backbone of society. Many classical liberals have tried valiantly to justify the state by referring to a voluntarist standard, for Christ's sakes. You know, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and of the governed, rather. So what is government? Let's continue to stress the crucial importance upon definitions here, as Rand would agree. What is the essential fundamental characteristic that separates government from any other social institution? What attribute or distinguishing characteristic unites all governments under a common definition? And of course, there's many types of governments. The term government subsumes absolute monarchy, Nazism, fascism, democratic socialism, any other number of sundry dictatorships. And but if we understand just what this term means, government, if we go to the objectivists hurling over proper definitions and just assume that a government means is an institution that protects individual rights, they're merely asserting a certain form of government, but they're not going to the core of the definition. So let's do that here and not bypass that. A government is an institution that holds the exclusive power, rules of social conduct in a given geographical area. We have Wayne that physically has joined us now.
Hey.
Now, to hold exclusive power, the state must initiate force against people. Okay, that is a definition. That is a fundamental characteristic of government. Is the basic definition that speaks to all governments is that it must initiate force to hold its exclusive monopoly. That's a government. Okay, that is a crucial definition of government. Okay, if the initiation of force is not a part of the equation, it's not a government. And I'm anxious to hear how Wayne can get around that and square that circle, but we'll get to that, I guess. Government is force. Ayn Rand, the arch advocate of a constitutional republic, will inform you that government is force. Barack Obama will tell you that government is force. George Washington will tell you that government is force. Government is not reason, it's not eloquent, it's force. So, government, recognizing that government is the initiation of force, the very institution that is said to uphold and protect individual rights itself, by its very nature, violates individual rights in order to hold its exclusivity on power, and in which we lead to not only a logical, epistemological contradiction, we also lead to a major breach in ethical philosophy, which is the protection of individual rights and the non-aggression principle, if you want to side with the anarchists. I'll embrace individual rights, I'll embrace the non-aggression principle. How much have I got my time there, Mr. Daniel?
You got a minute.
I got a minute, okay. Yeah, so another thing I'd like to discuss with Wayne too is that if we are to understand that that insofar as we both agree to embrace a free market, that means that there would be no institutionalized state-indoctrined schools. There is not to be a monopoly on the money supply. and that if a government is to rule by consent, it has to actually do that and not just state it, and to see if with those three qualifiers, if we could actually have anything that constituted a proper and rational, objective definition of what we understand to be government. Okay, that's it.
All right.
So now we'll have a so are you ready?
Yes. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
What's
go
it
ahead.
about?
8-minute rebuttal. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you say this government is a moral institution. I find that it's interesting you say that. One of the problems, I'm with the Freedom Party, obviously the shirt indicates that. I'm obviously an advocate of, I know the libertarians argue for getting rid of things like, abolishing, government health care, for example, stuff like that. We, at the Freedom Party, we say, well, what we can do with health care is that, end the monopoly in a sense, allow for you to compete. So if you want to buy health care from a private health insurer, and there's the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, if you want to opt into that, you can opt into that. If you want to opt into a private option, you can opt into a private option. And so one of the approaches that we have is to actually, have competition with these services, and through the competition, the efficiency of the market will show. And that, obviously, so competition on obviously a lot of things is a good thing. But competition in the making of law is not a good thing. That's what the problem you tend to face. And I think anarchists have a hard time understanding that what they're really advocating is competition in the very nature of what law is, what aggression is, what force is. And I think it's important to reason from how things are now and project into the future about how things will be in the future. And I don't think you'll ever get a society where 90% or more are objectivists and embrace certain ideas. I mean, let's take the law in Canada, for example, and just take the radical feminism or feminists. Our laws have changed in certain fundamental ways. I mean, obviously, just to state this very clearly, I find rape repugnant and immoral and evil. A convicted rapist, deserves to be in jail for a long, long period of time. But those of us who are innocent and deal with others based on consent, we've had changes to our law based on the what's called LEAF, which is the Legal Education Action Fund, and they've through the influence through the judicial activism, you have law clerks who influence the lawyers, do all the research, and Catherine McKinnon influenced our laws, our criminal code laws, with regard to section. Trying to think of this. There's sections. There's actually it's basically rape shield laws and cross-examination. They changed laws to make it more basically. If someone accuses you of something, it's the onus of proof is on you to prove that you didn't. That it's more or less they're shifting the burden now onto the accused. And this is the result of the influence of ideas, right? So ideas get into to the court system, and I can't see how that would be better off in an anarchist system. Obviously, I believe that philosophically we have a lot of things that we got to change. But if you just take that issue alone, you see how the laws have changed, and that they've taken the influence of a radical feminist like Catherine McKinnon into the actual making of the laws. And so that's how I think a society would just be that much worse. It would be a subjectivism at a grand scale throughout the culture. And I know I saw Daniel's post about I don't know, Daniel's the moderator, so I shouldn't be taking a. But it really makes sense to make this point is that yes, the idea of all these small little DROs around advocating various ideologies. Feminists are, a lot of feminists are green advocates. They advocate environmentalism. A lot of them are, in favor of this ethnocentrism and stuff like that. They hate, generally hate white males. And so you could have ad hoc. I could project ad hoc allegiances on particular issues where they would, they would gang together and push their agendas through. And so I don't have a mind, a thought action split with regard to the law. The law is the law. That is protection of life, liberty, and property. It can be only violated but through your consent. So it's the consent of the individual, or the consent of the individual. If you come to me and want my property and I agree, then you can have that. But it all you can't have a situation where you have competitive lawmakers within a particular geographical location. I ask you, Victor, how would you be able to determine, what the law is in a particular? Who determines what the law is? That's my question to you. Who determines what the law is?
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm just. How long do I have?
You have a little under 2 minutes.
Okay, a little under 2 minutes. And then we're going to.
Or you feel the balance of your time.
Okay. Well, no. What's after this? Is there questions?
There's Q&A. You guys will ask each other some. Maybe I'll ask you each other some, and then just final summation.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll end on this point because this is something that really bothers me. Is anarchists level the pejorative, which in the classical liberal tradition, statism. I mean, Mises used this term, and incidentally, I just don't think those who are anarchists at the Mises Institute should form another organization. But statist is not what I am. I am opposed to statism. I believe the sovereignty resides with the individual. The state's job is to, the government's job, I like to use the word government, is to protect life, liberty, and property, and cannot be violated but through my consent. And so I am not a statist. I do not advocate this. I advocate objective law. And Ayn Rand used attack statism. She made it explicitly clear what she was attacking. Von Mises did, and so to use that term against us, to say that Ayn Rand and myself and others are statists, and at the same time, in the same respect, say Marcuse or Barack Obama are statists. I mean, see how the problem is? You're using the same word to describe individuals who are fighting for liberty within the culture. And what you do is you turn people off from, I think it's just irrational. I think you guys look foolish to level that term. I think it's on you. You guys look stupid saying it. So, but anyway, I wanted to end on that point. We're not statists, and if anything, the anarchists set up a system where statism would thrive because it is.
All right, done.
Okay. All right. Rant done.
Go ahead, Victor. I mean, go.
All right.
Yeah,
now,
8 minutes. Go.
Follow-up reply. Okay. Now, the objectivists assert that, as Wayne just did in so many words, that an anarchist is one who wishes to place coercion, the use of force, and the ability to use it on the market. This is both misleading and mistaken. The assertion is mistaken because placing coercion on the market is not some kind of anarchist position. An anarchist is one who wishes to eliminate coercion, and most especially not to have it concentrated in a centralized way that is focused and institutionalized in an exclusive form at the epicenter of society. When anarchists seek is to open the protection of individual rights, arbitration of disputes, and judgment of wrongdoing to any person or persons who may choose to offer these services. Okay, it's freedom, okay, to act on these services. It's not so much for the value or the pursuit of competition, but it's the name of freedom of action. Okay, when an anarchist seeks to provide a protection service agency, he's not violating the rights of anybody, and to prohibit him from doing so is to violate his rights. Now, further, anyone to allow anybody who wishes to offer or to avail themselves of these services and to do so freely without interference from any group calling itself government is what the anarchist is standing by. Freedom of action, not for the sake of competition. Not even the objectivists would defend the free market on the basis of competition. They would defend it on the basis of the application of trade and the voluntary offer and exchange of services and goods is a freedom of action. That's what a free market is, not for the sake of competition, right? Now, so Rand and the issue of the non-initiation of force when it comes to government, which was such of great significance for Ayn Rand as an ethical philosopher. I mean, she talked about voluntary taxation or voluntary contributions. I mean, she knew, of course, that how governments fund themselves was through violent taxation. This was problematic. So, this has been adopted as a principle by many libertarians. They're taking to heart and taking to issue of Rand's position on this, and the problems of it, the ethical problems of taxation, which the objectivists have dropped. They just take the government as a ready-made institution. Well, there it is. Let's hope for the best that it'll be an objectivist-styled a kind of government, and its exclusive reason for that government is to protect individuals. But they're not troubling themselves as much as Rand did as to how this institution is to maintain its stay. So this is an issue that has problems with the libertarian / anarchist. Okay, now the sole reason offered for a state monopoly on coercion is the allegation that coercion may be used to violate rights if left to market forces. That it may happen, may very well happen. That's why there's a discussion of having DROs and having constitutions and tribunals and courts and the like and things like that. Even in a stateless society, these are concerns, as it would be with the objectivists. So, but that's hardly persuasive as to make your cases that there would be the violation of individual rights. So therefore, we need a state to prohibit that. Of course, that's a concern with the anarchists. As for polycentricism, it's not some kind of like 21 flavor cream flavor shop that you go to. It just means this decentralization of conflict resolution provisions of services to be offered to the people. That's all that it means. It doesn't mean flavors. Okay? Anarchists have written extensively on the need for quote, constitutions, jurisprudence, and courts in a non-state system. Such matters were discussed during the late 1800s, early 1900s by libertarian anarchists such as Gustav Molinari, Benjamin Tucker, Francis Tandy, more recently in Such for Liberty by Morris and Linda Tennehill. There's also the book For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard, The Structure of Liberty, Justice and the Rule of Law by Randy Bennett. There's even George H. Smith. George H. Smith is an individual that both Wayne and I have met.
Victor, Victor, did he conk out?
Yeah. Where the hell is he going? Then he hit something. Now he's back, or sort of.
You back, Victor? Hold on.
Yeah, he's working on it.
Victor, are you back? I paused it, but let's. Wait. Victor. Yeah, you back?
Hi there. Yeah, can you hear me?
Resume your time because I paused it. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, go.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
go.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So basically, I conked out there. Sorry about that. Okay, now my final statement, I guess I can say on this whole thing is orthodox objectivists. I know it sounds very derogatory, but objectivists in general, they seem to think that they are exempt from reading what their opponents have actually said. Instead, they spin imaginary opponents, Sharia law and the like, in scary scenarios, some Thomas Hobbes, state of nature arguments right out of their ass, and then they attack those fantasies. Okay, as Rothbard and many others have suggested, rational self-interest would generate cooperation among different agencies. Take a classic example. Suppose two different agencies reach different verdicts in a criminal case. Is it so difficult to imagine that these agencies would have agreed beforehand to submit excuse me, such disputes to an impartial third-party arbitration agency, that this problem would not be seen beforehand? Bloodletting is not the first option of most people. But if we are to believe Rand, such agencies would have no recourse, or other objectivists, they would have no recourse except to go to war. That's it. That's the only choice there. We might as well just say that Canada and the U.S. have no recourse except war in cases that involves overlapping jurisdictions. Of course, it's complete bullshit and it's complete nonsense. So we first have to caricature the anarchist as some kind of like a thumb-sucking subjectivist monster rolling around in his own excrement because he doesn't have because there's no government in place for us to understand what objectivity means, or what objective law means, or what a rational ethics-based approach to normative questions would be all about without the government. It's ridiculous.
Time's up.
Okay.
Fine. So now we're going to do some Q&A. I'll ask, you'll ask some questions. Ideally, make the answers short. I'm not going to time you, but if you could keep it like a minute or less, that would be great. So, why don't
Are you going to ask questions first?
Huh?
I didn't hear that part. Did you say that you're going to ask questions first, or what?
You guys can ask first. Why don't you ask, I don't know, 3 to 5 questions, and then I'll ask 2 questions, and then we'll have the...
Right. I got some questions, too.
All right, so why don't you start?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Victor. Okay. So, would you agree with me that there are in the universities right now there's professors and those who go into law that advocate extreme ideas, and that there are extreme ideas in Canada right now, meaning extreme jihadist individuals that exist in the mosques, and that there are extremist feminist scholars that exist in the universities, that there are there are militant there are militant organizations or groups in Canada right now. Would you agree that there are? It's a question.
Well, hell yeah. It'd be kind of hard to disagree, because there they are.
Okay.
If you're asking me if there's a bundle of different irrational people out there who form in groups, whether it be the feminists or communists, modern day communists walking around declaring themselves as neo-Marxists or whatever, or the Zeitgeist group, etc. Yeah, well, of course they are. Yeah.
Well, we met some when we went to the International Socialist meeting on Bathurst. I remember. You remember they were arguing?
I remember that.
Yeah, they were arguing with a Maoist. He had the wrong view approach.
Yeah, I remember that we went under a covert covert was insincere form into the group, you know, that were just there to listen and
We were kicked
whatnot.
out.
But then we're at dinner, we're starting arguing with them, and then we pretty much got the boot from there. Okay,
Yeah,
you guys
yeah.
can leave now.
Yeah. Okay, so you agree. So what would stop them from setting up their own agencies to enforce their own law? And would you say that if they did create you call it a dispute resolution organization or whatever you want to term it, I call them just mini states, because if they're arresting, prosecuting, and jailing, that's a state. Then what would stop them? What would stop them from getting in a polycentric system? Wouldn't it be a natural thing for them to do, to say, okay, now we can set up our shop and have our own little government? Government, status thing, justice agency.
Yeah, well, because of various DROs, it's the objectivists or other limited government advocates might therefore designate it as a calling for a polycentric law system, things like that. I'm just starting to think now that maybe it's a misnomer. Just because you do have competing defense agencies, it doesn't necessarily logically entail that will be 21 Baskin-Robbins flavor of polycentric law systems. But you know what? In an ideal objectivist government could emerge, if that's to emerge and to be sustained, it would only be in a society with a very high percentage of rational people. I imagine you agree with that, right? I mean,
yes,
if we ever saw, so whatever in the conception, the objectivist conception of government, if that was ever to emerge, that would be a fundamental change in a society's dominant philosophy. You might have scatterings of irrational people over here and there, little mystics and little navel gazers and incense and peppermints, and sure, that would still be there. But the predominant core of that philosophy would be a rational society, right? So only if a substantial percentage of a population understands and respects individual rights will a truly limited government be possible. That's the objectivist position. Fine. I have no problem with that as a working assumption. What I do have a problem with, however, is that when minarchists or objectivists change the assumption in their attacks on anarchism. Now, instead of a predominantly rational culture, we have the vector of bands of irrational thugs forming their own agencies. In fact, we have such organizations today. They're called organized crime, street gangs and the like. Now, these organized gangs of thugs are given little or no legitimacy, even in today's irrational society. You agree, right? Look at how irrational the society out there, okay? But even in today's society, people recognize as street gangs or organized crime for what it is. And it's not given any legitimacy. So to suggest that a system with competing justice agencies would have no method to identify, condemn, and suppress such outlaw organizations, and if we understand why I might say law here, we're referring to the moral law, right?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Am I going over my answer, my response?
Well, yeah. Can you just make the answers a little shorter?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Yeah. So.
All meat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that would just be my response to Wayne's objection to a rational society. So therefore, you would have a multitude of what he's taken to be a self-evident. Wouldn't it be bad with all these irrational, crazy, lunatic DROs out there? We're just supposed to accept it as lunatic, and unjust and brutal and whatever. So it's fully recognized, yeah. So it doesn't mean that the anarchist is fully endorsing that. We have no means to identify some ridiculous, irrational, brutal organization, whatever it's called, government or a DRO, some outlaw, bizarro, wacko DRO, or just your standard street thugs, whatever, right? So
can I say something? Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that even Murray Rothbard and George H. Smith, and I brought this up at the last debate that we had, they had a difference of opinion with regard to child's rights. Murray Rothbard's perspective, and I love Murray Rothbard's economics. I used to subscribe to the free market, and so I used to read Murray Rothbard's work when he would publish in that. And I've read a lot of his works, and I really respect him in terms of his Austrian economics. Of course, I reject. There's Victor back. I reject the anarchist view, but him and George H. Smith had that difference of opinion where George advocates, I'll get back to Murray. Murray Rothbard advocates that a child, you can basically do whatever you want to your child in the sense that, if a child's misbehaving and you beat the child, I mean, really, it's the parent. The parent has sole control, and whereas George H. Smith has a different perspective, isn't like a guardian for the child, and sort of a view of the child in a very different way, like that you help a child develop into a rational adult, so you don't harm the child. And so if in a case where they have, you have two people who are very close ideologically, differing, I think, on a particular issue, which is, pretty important. And, you have Stefan Molyneux recently coming out. I haven't watched his video about, and I know, Victor, you have a difference of opinion there with his view on rights being, that there's no, it sounds like it doesn't argue, he argues against this idea that rights can be grounded in human nature. Maybe you can address that after my point, but what I'm trying to, my point is that when you have, I view government as the protection of life, liberty, and property, and it's a consensual system, and so it's based on the idea of consent, and that the state within a geographical location, the government within a geographical location, has to have a monopoly on lawmaking, because then if you have a situation where you have various ideologies, we can say what a street gang is, and we could say certain behaviors of a street gang are verboten in the community, but we definitely differ, obviously in the culture today, as to the nature of what rights are, the nature of what aggression is, the nature of just justice in general, right? So I mean, there's tons of examples I could throw out there, but you're still lost. You're still left with, how is a DRO, like, what are the procedures of that DRO? What if they use psychics to determine the psychic DRO? So you go to that DRO and they use psychics to determine if that person's guilt or innocent, right? There are people. There's a psychic fair. It's going to be in Toronto, right? So there are irrational people, and there are people that are willing to put money towards it. There are very rational people in terms of commercialization, like Tom Steyer. I just want to mention Tom Steyer, who's a billionaire and a philanthropist, and he's also a big-time environmentalist. And what about someone who creates a DRO? It would just make sense to me rationally. And for you to sort of sorry to interrupt for a second.
If you have a question, you can.
Okay, so all right. The actual question would be.
And this will be the last one, and then I'll give Victor the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. You haven't answered to my satisfaction how laws are going, how the protection of property rights is going to exist, freedom of contract, consent, force. How are these concepts going to be implemented in law, and so not just implemented but created and understood within law. I see that if anybody can create the law, because that would be anarchy, then you're left with either outlawing them, which means putting them out of business, or so how are you gonna rectify that? That's my question, and you haven't answered it so far, but maybe I'll get a better answer now.
I can't hear you. You're on mute, Victor. No wonder you can't answer the question. You're on mute. And make it short. 30 seconds, a minute.
Oh, 30 seconds. I'm going to answer that question.
Or a minute,
sure.
But quick. Just quick.
Okay.
All right.
What's the rush? Okay. First of all, a private agency, far more than a government, must maintain legitimacy in the public eye. If an agency were to violate its own agreements and procedures, and we would have to know that in advance, what those procedures and agreements are all about, it would quickly lose public credit. A private agency is not automatically conferred with the aura of legitimacy and authority that established governments typically enjoy. So such respect has to be earned. And and your question seems to proceed, the premise of your question always proceeds from the son of a widely divergent, irrational society, such as I touched upon, that if we ever to speak of an anarchist stateless society, it would be the result of a certain ethical or philosophical revolution that takes place that's predominantly characteristic of that society, which I would argue would be the recognition of individual rights, the non-aggression principle. That can be very carefully defined as to what that means, so it doesn't differ from the person. But I could answer more on this, but I can feel the heady brow of our moderator coming down on me if I extend the answer a little bit further. What's your verdict on that? What I said so far? Can I expand?
I think it's
because I don't want to be accused later of offering an unsatisfactory answer within a 30-second time frame, right?
I think it's sufficient. Anyway, do you want to ask him your questions?
Sure.
And then
Maybe we can pick it up a little bit later.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not satisfied with my own answer given the brevity, not the content. Okay.
Life is about disappointment.
Okay, now, Wayne. Mm-hmm. Okay, one of the questions that I have, and this has always been a trouble with me, why I made a transition from being a limited government advocate kind of guy to my position today. This government, okay, I'm going to bring it back, and I don't feel that my answer was my question rather was satisfactorily answered during the first debate that we had. All right. Okay, how is a government to maintain its keep? Okay, what is the issue? What is I know that the Catholics, I think they canceled hell and then purgatory. Is the objectivist position still that that violent taxation, is that still a canon within the with the objectivist philosophy that the taxation is violence, and that therefore for government to maintain itself can strictly rely on the interest of individual rights, the observation of individual rights can only be funded voluntary contributions to the government. Is that right?
Well, I mean, obviously I think that you have to transition but the thing is, there should be some form, like insurance, where you pool all your money together and you pay for the government that's exists, right? So, sales taxes, consumption-based taxes are, I think, a better approach than, say, than taxes on production at source, because you can basically control your consumption patterns. And you're paying that way. I think a sales tax tends to be a better tax, if you like a tax, than say a production tax. But obviously, the dilemma, obviously, that not only yes, I mean the idea of who controls the the goal makes the rules, right? So, but at the same time, these services are necessary. So if a police officer is doing work, a judge is doing work, the judicial system, the military, these are obviously these are necessary functions, and so they're not slaves. They need to be paid. They need a wage, right? They need a wage, and so if they need to be they need to be compensated for their behavior, their actual job. So I think it doesn't make any sense. And if you going voluntary has its dilemmas in one sense, because in a few senses. But what about the idea of lobbying, right? So if someone's paying more money to that particular judge or whatever, or that should they get? You have to have a situation where they're paying, but the law is the law, right? And so they can't unduly influence the particular lawmakers because they're giving more money than somebody else who's giving less. So that sort of thing. So I think you have to transition in a way to a system where the power resides with the individual funding. But I think one of the best ways is really to have like a sales tax, and it's really it can be voluntary. I mean, you go to the unfortunately the LCBO in Ontario here. Sometimes they have these, do you want to give money to a particular hospital or whatever the case may be? And I have no problem with that. I'd have no problem with some type of bond or whatever. That can get really dicey, and there's a lot of corruption involved in that. But at the same time, if it's strictly controlled by the law, that in a constitution it goes to these particular areas, and that might be a solution. So there's solutions, but you gotta get the dilemma of actually having lobbying, particular politicians, in particular, the justice system, to ensure that you're not that you're able to get around the laws. So the corruption, that's what I'm concerned about, is the corruption that might come about. So I think that it needs to be worked out, but one of the good transitionary step is a sales tax. That would be my answer.
All right, I'm just going to time the answers from now on, because they're taking a lot longer than I'd hoped. So after you ask your next question, I'll set the buzzer to a minute. All right, go ahead, Victor. What's your next question?
Another question? Okay, yeah. Okay, well, that's the idea of this sales tax. I mean, there's so much to be said about that, but I'll just move on to my next question. Okay, yeah, no, I agree that certainly that that the services that a proper government is said to offer are legitimate services, legitimate needs among human beings: dispute resolution, peaceful dispute resolution, the proper containment of violence in society for those who violate individual rights. What's to be protected from that in jurisprudence in the terms of punishes meted out, etc. Of course, right? Mm-hmm. That is not in question by the anarchist, of course, right? So but the question, though, is that in the protection of individual rights, though, how is it that this state, which is just, of course, just a cadre of discrete individual human beings, how is it that they have some kind of moral claim, and from whence does this moral claim come from, and how is it justified, to which they are to be the exclusive provisioners of those services?
Good. I'm timing you. Go, Wayne.
Join the government. Join the government. If you don't want to, if you don't think that the individuals within the government are actually doing what you think they should be doing, then you join the government and you try to influence the lawmakers. I mean, I'm on the executive of the Freedom Party, and I have said we've argued about particular policies or whatever, and we hash it out, and we have we have policy planks, and then so I mean, in government and you're in law, you have. There'd be particular areas, with regard to, where are the, what should be the minimum sentence for, manslaughter? It's all like different, things, right? You have different laws, and you would have to. This is where legal scholars come in, and you have some understanding, and there's context and everything else involved. But I just think that the that's it. Well,
All right.
okay.
Victor, last question, and Len, we're not going to have time to do a summation, final
No,
summation.
we should have summations.
Huh?
We should have a summation. We should be able to summarize our.
Daniel's ass is on fire for an appointment he has coming up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll just ask a few questions,
Okay.
and then,
All right, that's understandable.
but why don't you ask your last question, Victor?
Okay. Now, would there? Okay, I didn't really feel that my last question was answered. I mean, I don't know. Like,
Well,
the question was pertaining. Yeah. No, but yeah, no. Well, in a with an objectivist-style government, would there be a monopolization on the money supply, or would that be allowed by the philosopher kings of the Iranian government, that the free market can reign supreme there, and not only in the production of toothpaste, shoes, and computers and cars and the like, but and how about in the provision of the services of providing competing mediums of exchange? Would that have an exclusivity on it, as allowed by this magical government that seems to have special oppositional moral rights?
You separate
differing.
Can I answer that, Victor?
Sure. Okay.
I believe that you obviously. I mean, I don't know why you asked this question. Obviously, you know that I believe that you separate government from the money supply. I believe that you repeal legal tender laws, and you. I think the gold standard tends to be the preferred choice, but I mean allow for competition among various silver, gold, whatever. I've read Mises on this and Menger on it. I mean the evolution of money. I've read the Austrian school approach, so I actually do accept that, and there's even a whole argument about fractional reserve banking, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So I even accept Murray Rothbard's perspective on that. So no, I'm definitely.
Well, yeah. No, well, I'm glad to hear it though. But now I'm just wondering, how is it that a government can tax its citizens, sales tax or otherwise, unless it holds an exclusive monopoly on the money supply? So I don't know where this tax is going to come from and maintained on a competing market of a medium of exchange. But maybe that's just that can be found in Plato's cave.
It's a transition.
So I'll just ask one question for each of you. I'll play devil's advocate. I was a minarchist. So, huh?
I didn't say anything.
Oh. Go ahead.
So I'll just ask a question for each of you. I guess Wayne will go first. I'll play devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne, during the debate, you said that under government there'd be objective law, but under under anarchy, different people would decide what laws they're subject to. My question for you is, in any type of system that's going to exist, can only exist if the masses support the rules which are currently in place. If they don't, they will rebel. So the government is just as subject to the masses as the market is. So my question to you is, why do you think that the voting mechanism is a better way to reach objective law than the pricing mechanism?
Okay, how long do I have?
A minute.
Okay, I reject the way you set up the question. It's not like I think a political party, for example, comes to the public to say, here's our policy planks, vote for them, and you support them based on the particular perspective they hold. It's not like you're voting to be able to violate individual rights, the right to life, liberty, and property. That would be something that you would have to have a government to sustain. But it's because you have a polycentric legal system that it necessarily lends itself to competition, because you've basically stated competition within the monopoly on the services. So that necessitates the idea that rights, what constitutes consent, what constitutes a crime, would exist, because these organizations would fail.
All right. Cool. And my final question for you, Victor. Uh,
Yep.
During the debate, one of the things that Wayne said, which I think is a fair criticism, is that why would, one of the benefits of having a state is that their income is not determined by the consumer. And therefore, you will have justice which will be somewhat impartial. But if you have justice supplied by the market, um, why would you have a fair justice system? Why would the courts not favor the clients who pay them the most?
Right. Even recognizing such a problem is that you yourself are stating it and probably has formed the question without hearing it elsewhere. I think is probably I have heard that same concern objection elsewhere, which I think would be pretty much a predominant concern across the board. But there's a book by or an article, I'm not sure, Bruce Benson. He, in fact, demonstrated that the subjective value preferences are precisely what drive state bureaucracies. So it's quite the opposite of the charge. It's kind of like a sense of, it almost seems like a form of psychological projection when the limited government throws that out, right? But
at least I
there's
only
no
have one
evidence
enemy.
to suggest.
At least I would only have one enemy.
There is no evidence to suggest, and no reason to suppose that the people who run governments are likely to be more objective than their fellow humans involved in markets. The
Well,
evidence is
thank
quite
you.
the contrary, in fact.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a great debate.
Yes, thank you very much, Dan.
I'm not going to say who won or lost. That's for the viewers to decide. But it was great having you on. Take care.
Thanks, Victor.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks, Wayne. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Victor. Cheers, man.
All right. See you guys later.
Thanks.